rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1!
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Well, it's definitely been a busy week for us here at Rebel Force Radio. Earlier this week, we started the official after show. Well, it's our official. It should be the official. I mean, what other after show are you going to listen to? Yeah, let's call it the official after show of Skeleton Crew. So I hope you were able to join us. If you didn't catch the show live, which we broadcast every week whenever there's a new Disney Plus series airing, hopefully you caught it on podcast and were able to check it out. We had a great time, really, really good callers. And I tell you what, there's some good vibes in the air, I think, with respect to this show. We're only 2 episodes deep, 1 week into it. But so anything can happen. We know that. We've been, once bitten, twice, 3 times, 4 times shy, I guess, in some cases. But there's some good positive vibes, not just coming from, I think, people, Star Wars fans and people calling into the shows like this, but also from within the show itself. I think there's just a general good vibe coming from within the show. So, of course, we'll be talking more Skeleton Crew this week here on Rebel Force Radio. We've got some highlights of the big premiere that they had at Disneyland. So we'll hear from guys like Dave Filoni and members of the cast and all of that. So that's really going to be fun. Plus some listener feedback. We already got a couple of great voicemails about Skeleton Crew. And if there is time, we will get to Star Wars and pop culture. But, we want to revel in this week where we have a brand new Star Wars series coming at us each and every week, courtesy of Disney Plus. So welcome to the program. Great to be with you. If you're new to the show, and introductions may be in order, my name is Jason, and with me, as always, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Back in the saddle for the weekly RFR. 2 shows, 2 RFR shows each week. That's good because I like hitting the weekly show right after the after show, because then we can say some things that we might have missed or forgot to say during the after show. And one of those things that, I want to say personally is a lot of people are like picking apart my questioning, my inquiries about the presence of Elephant Boy Neil among the 4 protagonists. I said, why do you think they went in that direction instead of just presenting us 4 kids? And we talked it all out and everything. And so instantly, some members of the listening audience think that Jimmy Mack hates Neil. That's not exactly...
You're just asking a question. You're just asking a question.
Sometimes I do like to be like a devil's advocate when we are analyzing these shows. I like to get inside the creators' heads as much as I possibly can and try to figure out why certain production decisions are made and things like that. And I do believe that putting Neil among the crew is an effort to make it feel more Star Wars-y, so it's not going to be confused with Stranger Things or Goonies, more or less inspired by those things, but not confused with them. By including an alien boy with the other 3, it instantly gives it that exotic Star Wars quality. Plus, it's a very toyetic character.
Yeah, there's the
which
cute
I think
factor.
may have. Yes, there's merch that can be utilized to a great extreme should Neil prove to be a popular character. And thus far, I think people do like Neil.
Yeah.
So for anybody in the audience who walked away with the opinion that I hate Neil, or another one that I saw was, boy, for years Jimmy Mack's been complaining about the lack of aliens in new Star Wars, and now there's an alien in new Star Wars, and he's complaining about it. again, we're trying to analyze all this stuff. Those aren't necessarily my opinions, but sometimes these questions pop up in my head when I'm watching this stuff. Right. And I think that the origin of that is coming from almost 2 decades of conducting Star Wars interviews with Star Wars creatives and trying to get inside their heads. So I'm sort of hardwired to approach Star Wars like that. But don't think that it's my opinion. You will know when it's my opinion. I don't shy away from throwing down opinion. So
when you don't like something, you know.
But if I throw something out for the sake of conversation and analysis, then let's just ride the wave and see where it goes. Because that helps us break it down.
I actually like where we landed in that conversation, which was perhaps this was one of the ideas we tossed out. Maybe the problem isn't that they have Neil. Maybe it is that they didn't go far enough with Neil. You know, if Neil was speaking some Star Wars, far out Star Wars language, and only his buddy was able to understand him, and maybe the girls were starting to learn to understand him, there would have been kind of that the Chewbacca factor or element with that. So that I like, because I think we kind of hit on something there, because I feel like with that character, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to have the exotic, cute Star Wars alien, but beyond the look, there is absolutely nothing. The voice, the language, the mannerisms, there is nothing exotic about him.
And also it reinforces an idea that George Lucas had thrown out there about having alien species present in Star Wars and interacting with humans as if it's run-of-the-mill commonplace stuff and doesn't need to even be second thought for a moment. It's the acceptance of others who look differently than you. I mean, I think that's George talked about this last summer when he was being honored out in France at Cannes. And he talked about how that is a theme that he was very aware of. And I know we've talked about that here on RFR too.
Right. You don't see aliens in the Empire, certainly not in the rank and file. When you see those Imperial officers lined up, you don't see anything exotic. They're all humanoid figures. And that was part of the backstory. I think that we even grew up through the novelization and things where something early on, I remember somehow knowing about the backstory was that there was prejudice against alien species, and many of them were enslaved to enrich the Empire and their home planets destroyed. And we are seeing a lot of that play out, from Geonosis to other civilizations. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because just because we throw something out there doesn't mean, for the sake of the conversation, doesn't necessarily mean that is our end, opinion on the whole thing. All right out of the gate, I don't like Neil, so we're just questioning.
It's just funny sometimes for me to see what people walk away from after listening to our conversations and the assumptions.
A 2.5-hour conversation. They walk away with one little 10-second or 15-second blurb.
Well, you know how it is. You have voices, like people are wearing AirPods, or we're coming through car speakers and stuff, and we're really there with these people as they are going about their day-to-day existence. That's the power of audio. That's what has made radio endure for so long, and why podcasting has become such a successful media so quickly is because of the intimacy. And so sometimes, we're getting intimate with you people, and and so we just want to make sure you're not making any wrong assumptions about that intimacy.
Right. Well, this was cool. I was looking at the rundown here, and something that we didn't get to. We didn't really spend a whole lot of time on the visuals. We had some callers that talked about how they felt this was cinematic. Jim, you were able to see this in the movie theater and remarked about how it visually held up to where, this should be seen on a big screen, and it holds up to a big screen presentation. But beyond that, we didn't get into a lot of the nitty-gritty details. And apparently there were some Easter eggs that were spotted. This one I did not catch. Did you happen to catch this on your first or second or third viewing?
No. It's one of those things I caught some social media buzz about. So, and I thought it was sort of a cool callback. It's the presence of the concept model for the Millennium Falcon that was created by Colin Cantwell in the mid-70s. And it's the elongated looking Millennium Falcon, which did eventually evolve into the Rebel blockade runner that we see at the very beginning of the film. But they took the cockpit from the original concept and they removed it and added a more like hammerhead type design for the Rebel blockade runner. And then they took the cockpit from this elongated Falcon version and they stuck it on the side of what George Lucas suggested, make it in the shape of a hamburger. And I guess it was a hamburger with a bite taken now because that's like the forks in front, the mandibles up in front. But this is Colin Cantwell's design. Colin Cantwell was an original graphic artist and model maker who George Lucas employed when he was working on early drafts of Star Wars. And he needed a visual representation of the Millennium Falcon. And what Colin Cantwell came up with was this elongated model of the Millennium Falcon. This idea was scrapped because just prior to Star Wars going into actual production, a TV show called Space 99 was on, and they had a ship that was suspiciously familiar and similar to this Colin Cantwell design for the Millennium Falcon. So that's why George Lucas said, make it look more like a flying saucer, more in the shape of a hamburger with an olive on the side. And that was the cockpit, the olive on the side.
Yeah.
And thus one of the most iconic fictional starships ever created came to be. And that's the story of the Millennium Falcon. So they took this design, this Colin Cantwell design, and they showed it to us when the gang, the Skeleton Crew gang, was flying toward the pirate port of Borga, and they were flying in their ship, the Onyx Cinder. They were flying through this giant parking lot of starships, it seemed, like this endless pirate ship gathering at the Borga port. And in the background, you can see there's the Colin Cantwell Millennium Falcon, the original concept design from 1974, 75. And it looks like it's attached to another ship, maybe. That's a deep cut. That is a deep cut. So bravo to those out there in social media land who picked up on this, because I have to concur, that is the same ship. So that's a great little Easter egg from episode 2 of Skeleton Crew. And maybe we'll see it again. So keep your eyes open. There could be some more familiar starship designs flying around in the background. Let me know if you see like Dash Rendar's ship, the Outrider, or something like that. I don't know. Could be
Ghost
anything.
Crew.
It could be. I mean, it could be a deep Easter egg, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the name of the Port Borga itself comes from Kevin J. Anderson's Young Jedi Knights Shadow Academy book from the mid-'90s. And I don't know if it was necessarily like a pirate port back then, but...
Well, you know, something
now.
that we don't really have any indication of, I don't think, in the show, is how close the action here at Borga is to... say Coruscant, or, you know, the more centralized part of the galaxy. I get the impression that this is pretty, even though At-Aten is well removed to the point of mythology, this is also a pretty remote kind of place. I don't see the New Republic patrolling this particular space station. Otherwise, I don't see these pirates all being there together, kind of assembled and taking advantage of people who kind of find it and are at the wrong place at the wrong time. So this seems like it's probably out there.
Well, that's a good question. In the introduction for the first episode, there was, instead of a crawl, they just put up sort of a blurb to get you caught up. Let's call it the blurb. It's the blurb. And the blurb said, so this might kind of, I'm just looking at this blurb to see if there's any indication as to like where we're at here. But the blurb says, since the fall of the Empire, the New Republic has maintained order. And yet, remote hyperspace routes are increasingly plagued by piracy. These pirates boldly brand their armored hulls as a sign to all ships, surrender or die. Dead men tell no tales. So it doesn't say the dead men. I added that, just to pirate it up a little bit. But so remote hyperspace routes. So, these guys are probably on the edge of the galaxy. And also, the pirates did have a presence on that planet Navarro from The Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's right.
And we know it's the same gang because Vane is the dude who is kind of the crossover from that series to this series.
Yeah.
Nobody knows where Urkel was at this time. Space Urkel.
Space. We don't have a location for Space Urkel at this point, either before or after. But I thought that the idea of adding Vane or using him as you say a crossover character wasn't something that was necessary, but it's kind of nice. It does help establish the timeline. It gives maybe more novice fans the opportunity to understand. Oh, that's a guy that I remember from The Mandalorian, so it must be the same time frame. I mean, it's getting to the point though, or it is to the point where a pal of mine who is a much more casual fan, but he's been watching all this Disney Plus series, mainly because I keep encouraging him to, but he'll always ask me the same question when we start talking about a new series is, all right, when does this take place? He really does. So, but so maybe something like adding a character like Vane is in their minds helps with that.
Yeah, and there may be some other characters that show up who could bring some familiarity. One of those characters is Hondo Ohnaka, but the guys from Skeleton Crew, Chris Ford and John Watts, somebody asked them that question in these press junkets they've been doing.
Yeah.
And they said, no Hondo. Just don't even think about Hondo.
No,
they didn't. Obviously he was on the table, I believe, but they said they just didn't have anything significant for Hondo to do, and so they didn't want to make Hondo's live action debut to just be
just a little cameo, an Easter egg. Yeah,
something that barely moves the needle as far as pushing the story forward. They didn't want to use Hondo as some gimmicky tool, like, say, Yoda showing up in the last scene of The Acolyte.
I was about to say, well, wait a minute. What gives Hondo this place in the pantheon of Star Wars characters that need to have an absolute incredible debut in one of these series? Let's just throw Yoda in there.
Well, or it could be a situation where Filoni said, "Oh, you guys want to use Hondo?" Because Filoni's got plans for Hondo, you see.
I'm sure he does.
Yeah. I think a lot of those Filoni characters are sort of hands-off for other creatives.
Hey, before we lose Skeleton Crew, I do think we have a couple of good voicemails. But before we do that, Jim, there has been, I think, some confusion because they moved the premiere date of Skeleton Crew from Tuesday to Monday, which caused us to do our after show on Tuesday. So there's a little bit of housekeeping we want to bring everybody up to speed on what the schedule for RFR, the after shows, and the weekly podcast, how we're going to follow here throughout the holiday season.
All right, what we got going on here next week and the following week? Skeleton Crew After Show Live on YouTube will happen on Wednesday night.
Right.
So next week and the week after that, Wednesday night Skeleton Crew after shows. And then, of course, the audio podcast will drop at some point within the hours following the live show.
Right.
Then, what's going to happen with the Skeleton Crew taking up the Wednesday/Thursday slot in our programming schedule. The weekly RFR, which you typically get on Fridays, will be dropping on Saturday mornings, just like we did when the Acolyte was on. We have to maintain that kind of schedule. And if you can always get RFR Q&A on Patreon, plus RFR RPG, the Babu Freaks, bonus podcast, full show video, ad-free RFR can all be found at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. We want to see you there. And Bondcast. Everyone's asking about Bondcast. I think we've done like one Bondcast this year.
I was so primed. I'm so primed for Tomorrow Never Dies. I've watched it twice.
I'm ready to go. But I fear tomorrow is dying, Jason, because we're running out of time this year. We had plans with Jonathan to get together to do Bondcast for the last couple of weeks, but Jonathan has had some laryngitis issues, and he has a very busy December.
He's got
Jonathan
very
Wilkins.
little kids. He's got two very young kids.
Yeah.
And the holidays are, of course, a very busy time for that. But
it's busy when you're a father and an MI6 agent, just like Jonathan Wilkins is. And so he's our man in London, and we really can't do the show without him. Jonathan even said, go ahead without me, guys. And it's like, no.
Yeah, it's not how it works.
We have to have you. We need that London flair in the Bondcast, that London charm of Jonathan Wilkins. So he's got a busy December, and we're going to reconvene for Bondcast in January 2025. Trust me, I'm ready. I'm ready for Tomorrow Never Dies.
Me too. Me too. And I'll give you just a little. I'll give you a little preview. Is that I'll just say for you Bondcast fans, I think it held up pretty well. And so much so that I watched it again after I watched it. Did a rewatch and I watched it again fairly soon after that. So I'll leave you with that.
You doubled down.
I doubled down. On 007 down. Can't. Yeah. Well, it was on Pluto, so I watched it first very purposefully. Then the eve before we were going to do the Bondcast, put the disc in, did the whole pomp and circumstance, and then the next day, or no, about a week later, I was flipping around on Pluto, and it showed up. I love that 007 channel.
Yeah,
on Pluto.
Yeah, that's good.
So I've seen it a couple times.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's.
I just watch them on Amazon.
Let's.
Right?
Are they all on? Yeah, they are on Amazon, aren't they?
I think they're all on Amazon.
Yeah, on MGM or on Amazon Prime. MGM.
It's nice. Nice to have that streaming at your fingertips anytime you want. So, all right, what do we got going on, Jason?
Hey, we got some listener mail. Let's check in.
Let's do it.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message? Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Chut, Jason and Jimmy. This is Fletcher from Maryland. Wanted to call because I finally had a chance to just finish watching the first 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew. Really enjoyed it, found them to be very fun. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about Jod and whether or not he can be trusted. A lot of speculation over whether or not he somehow tricked the kids, that he's not using the Force, but there maybe would be some ulterior motive where still operating as a pirate and never was a Jedi, either because he's using some other kind of tricks or might be a dark Jedi. I know there's been a lot of discussion back and forth about that. For me, I don't so much have speculation about what he is, so much as I really hope that he is in fact a Jedi, maybe someone who lost his way but is a Jedi, primarily just because the music as it's playing when he is levitating that key, if we come to find out that he never was a good guy, he never was a Jedi, he's either scamming them with some sort of trick or he's been on the dark side all along, I feel like it would just be such a slap in the face to that music, to that theme. It would be equivalent to me as Luke chucking his lightsaber nonchalantly in The Last Jedi. would just really be spitting on that part of the franchise in my mind. So I'm personally really, really hoping he is indeed a Jedi. Be curious to hear your thoughts. If it turns out that isn't the case, would you feel similarly about the poor treatment of that wonderful theme music that we see in that scene? Thanks for all you guys do. Look forward to hearing more of your thoughts on the show and everything else. Have a great day.
Great call and a great point by Fletcher in Maryland. Fletcher, I agree with you 100%. That is something that I don't think I mentioned. Jim, I recall you feeling maybe a little let down by the music, but that particular cue, the Force theme, which is not used on a whim, it's not used lightly in non-John Williams scored material, typically, was definitely heard when he was levitating the keys at the end of episode 2. And it really wasn't until Fletcher mentioned this that, yeah, I would say that it should, I'm not saying it's going to, but that should cement the character as being on the good side and being a legit Force user or Jedi. I won't go so far as to say Jedi, but I'll say legit Force user because it's not the Jedi theme, it's the Force theme. And so if that was, as you had speculated, potentially simple tricks and nonsense, that would be a really, that would be a misuse of that particular motif, I think.
Right. No, you're right. And I don't think it's any sort of fake out or anything. I think the character does legitimately tap into the Force. And the Force theme does make it, in my opinion, 100%. Yeah, that's something you don't want to mess with.
Yeah.
It's stripping down the legitimacy of that great John Williams composition that's been with us since 1977. No way. Now, the big thing to tackle is Jod. Is he a Jedi? Is he Jedi Jod, or is he just tapping into the Force? They say that, the Force truly awakens. There's been an awakening. Have you felt it? That doesn't come for several years later in the sequel trilogy era. We're far from that right now. We're at least a dozen years away, maybe 15 years, maybe more. If this happens in the same time that The Mandalorian is happening, then that stuff happens all 5 years after Return of the Jedi. So it covers a period of, 5 to 7 years after Return of the Jedi. For you guys keeping statistics, that would be 9 BBY. Oh, no, ABY. I'm sorry. ABY. I haven't ABY'd in a long time. It kind of felt awkward, but it felt good, too, at the same time. Yeah. So this is anywhere from 9 to 11 ABY.
I can't remember an example of a musical cue being used as a fake out in Star Wars. Or even being used, maybe fake out's not the right word, but being used ironically or out of place purposely. I just, the music is I feel like, and this is thanks to John Williams and I think pretty good stable of composers that have gone in to add on to his work. I think the music of Star Wars, you could argue, has been treated more sacred than just about any other aspect of Star Wars. Characters, storytelling, locations. I think there's been a lot more liberties taken with those than the music. The music does seem very much don't mess, don't do anything to delegitimize it.
Well, thus reinforcing our creation of the terminology, Star Wars oxygen. The music of John Williams. That is the oxygen that keeps Star Wars alive and breathing. You cut off the oxygen source, no air, no life. So I think even the Disney company understands that. Especially the Disney company should understand that, having IPs that go back 100 years. So I don't think that it's necessarily a fake out, but also I'm not claiming Jod is a Jedi. There are Force users in the galaxy. And it's just, was he ever trained to be able to use the Force? We've always been told that it can happen subliminally or subconsciously or however.
We've seen examples of infants
it could happen
using the Force.
It could happen naturally, but to actually be able to use it to make the Force do what you want it to do, that requires training. You're right, Jason. Like an infant, like a baby, like a baby Ahsoka can trip into it and use it without just because it's coming to her naturally.
Yeah.
But to be able then to just like, it's like those actors who can cry on demand. I mean, everyone can cry. Everyone's wept. But can you do it on demand? No, it takes a particular talent. It might take some training. It also might take some plucking of nasal hairs. Ow! Get those eyes watering a little bit.
Yeah, so I've heard sometimes those hairs, but like in your leg, like right on the inside of your leg, that actors have pulled through their pockets, all kinds of things. But I don't think that's going to help you conjure up the Force. So all signs point to that. Plus, here'd be another feather in the cap of Jod having a Jedi lineage of some sort, is the fact that they've introduced a character in Whim that has aspirational ideas of being a Jedi. He's a fan, you could say. And it would seem odd that, not saying that there aren't good creative decisions that could be made that would go the other direction, but it would seem odd that you would establish his love of the Jedi and his aspirations to not have it pay off in some way with a character like Jod being a Jedi.
Yeah, Jod could potentially train Whim in some ways of the Force. But again, Jod would have had some formal training. So a lot of mystery surrounding that character, and mystery in a good way, too. It's not left in a way that's keeping us guessing. We're in lockstep with our protagonists, the kids.
Yes.
And we're learning things as they learn them. So it's really set up in a really nice way. It's not relying on mystery box gimmicks that people like J.J. Abrams and Dave Filoni love to employ. This is straightforward linear storytelling with mystery. Yes, but you have to have a connection to the characters and be in lockstep with them and discover as they discover. That's what makes it fulfilling. That's good storytelling. And that's what we're getting here with Skeleton Crew. Finally, Star Wars made by professionals. Professional filmmakers, professional storytellers. People who know what they're doing. Directors who know what they're doing. Actors who can respond to the direction in an effective way. Star Wars has been lacking this for the last few series, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And the proof seems to be in the pudding here with this show. But as we were saying earlier, we're only 2 in. Anything can happen, but we're here for it regardless of what happens.
Rebel Force Radio.
Star Wars.
Hey, this is Dave Filoni, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts. In fact, the only podcast I listen to.
Rebel Force Radio!
Speaking of Dave Filoni, let's catch up with Dave Filoni as he spoke to cameras at the Skeleton Crew premiere event in Disneyland. That is our top headline.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right. So, Jim, there was a whoop-de-doo that happened there at Disneyland in Anaheim. And apparently, now was this this wasn't televised on Disney Plus or anything? I didn't miss a Skeleton Crew premiere special by any chance? No.
We have some coverage here from Extra, and also RFR microphones were there.
Oh, all right. Well, they always are, but that's good to know that we haven't missed a step there. Okay. So who do we have first?
Well, we got Filoni.
Okay.
Because Filoni's breaking news to a degree in some of these conversations he has with Extra TV. So they cornered Dave. There was a big Skeleton Crew launch premiere event that happened at Disneyland this past Monday. And everyone was there. Cast, crew, Favs was there. And if Favreau is there, Filoni is there too. Just look for the cowboy hat. And that's what Extra TV was doing. So they pulled Dave over and asked him some pretty straightforward questions, and he gave some straightforward answers too. But the interesting thing is we know that Dave is attached to this, as is Favreau, as executive producers. But how much do you think Filoni actually had to do with this show? Well, I think in this first clip, we get kind of some ideas about Dave's participation in this show, or maybe lack thereof, when they ask him what the biggest challenge was to bring Skeleton Crew to the screen. And as you'll hear, Dave is kind of speaking from maybe a distant observation point, which tells me that Dave's been busy on his own things and he wasn't really there, monitoring the day-to-day activity of Skeleton Crew. It was in good hands with John Watts and Chris Ford.
I think Star Wars is so unique in the way you have to create it. Everything is going to be crafted. It's hard just to go to these locations. They're all so special and unique and such a character. Every world, every vehicle, every costume needs to be considered. But with John Watts, Chris Ford, got great collaborators. They just dove into this. And John, Favreau and I, we loved their idea and just wanted to help support them through it. So it was really fun for me to watch them create this.
What's going on with the hat here? I like how he's experimenting with different textures. This is almost like a I don't know, like
got the little wolf pack.
Yeah, he does have the wolf pack thing going on. But this hat is got sort of it's like made out of like a backpack material or something. I don't know.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty cool. That's his premiere hat. Okay. He only wears it to premieres.
All right.
So there's Filoni, and what I meant by the setup about Dave not really being too involved is he definitely talks about everything as if this is really a John Watts, Christopher Ford production. And he was excited to watch those guys do their thing in the Star Wars universe. They didn't require too much hand-holding from guys like Filoni. These guys were in there, they knew what they were doing, and they got the job done. So there's Dave with just, just a flock of PR people. I just don't understand why they do these media things. And they make beautiful backdrops and stuff. And the talent talks to the people being interviewed. They're on camera. And the publicists are all standing behind, yapping at the top of their lungs, getting in all the shots, standing in front of the backdrops. Why do they do that?
Wait, did you see the kid mugging behind Filoni in that clip?
I did. That kid is the actor who plays, he plays Neil, the elephant.
Oh, that's why the face was a mystery to me.
Yeah. But he's very present in all of the junkets and interviews and stuff. And that kid just naturally disrupts any interview he's taking part in. I mean, he just completely steamrolls over everyone. He's a very energetic and precocious young man who might require some of the same media training those other kids got, because apparently Neil missed the meetings. But
he missed media training day. Robert Timothy Smith is his name.
That's him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like I said, he's He's rambunctious almost in some of these junkets I was watching and other media appearances they make. The kid, you don't see his face on screen, so he's going for it.
He's probably got an agent somewhere saying, "Hey, you know what you got to do? You're in a big show here, but no one sees your face. You make sure every opportunity you have to show you. You see Dave Filoni talking to a reporter, you jump up and you photobomb Filoni right there with your face."
Which he
Elephant
does.
boy. Yeah.
Which he does to great success. So that's Filoni. He has a few more things to say about Skeleton Crew. In this next clip, he talks about the appeal of this show.
The one word for me is adventure. To me, it gets back to Star Wars being a fun adventure and reminds me of exactly what you said, the movies I loved growing up, that sense of wonder and excitement of the unknown and, what's possible. And I think, they have a particular angle on that, a way of capturing it that's actually quite hard and challenging. So, it's I love the way it turned out. I'm so proud of them and excited for people to see it.
Okay. All right. So more of Dave, like you were saying earlier, just sort of making sure that spotlight is on the creators of this show, Ford and Watts, and that it's not the product of Lucasfilm Story Group, that he's really shining the spotlight on these creators, and not so much on the corporate brand or the label.
Right. And I'm sure Story Group was utilized a lot for this show. There's a lot of rules in place for Star Wars, and you do need some sort of entity that keeps an eye on all that stuff. So it doesn't become so outside canon or outside of
it can't
the
be a
realm
free
of
for
Star
all,
Wars.
right? I mean, that's not going to work.
Yeah, somebody has to be keeping an eye on that stuff.
Yeah.
But now
something
let's
that I
get
haven't heard, though, I just want to throw this out. You're talking, somebody should be keeping an eye on, or should be keeping an eye on this stuff. And with Filoni's promotion that he got some years ago, the thought was that he was the guy. He was the guy that was making sure all this stuff was lining up.
Yeah.
But it seems like maybe he's involved in other things and he's not as hands-on with all these other projects, or I don't know. I thought he was that guy that was doing that.
Well, I'm sure he gets involved, but it's not his thing,
Yeah.
It's really not a Dave Filoni production.
This does predate him ascending to that role, the Skeleton Crew, the concept. So, and we had mentioned that maybe what the difference is now with this new role is that he's in from the beginning of these things. So anything that's been in development from the start, say like the Mandalorian and Grogu film, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that would have Dave Filoni's involvement from that higher level with the promotion and maybe anything else that they've got cooking right now.
Right, because he was on the ground floor for production.
Right.
Unlike Skeleton Crew, which was brought is primarily a pretty well fleshed out idea from John Watts. Now, I've heard two different stories about how this show originated. One was Watts pitched it as a film to Kathy Kennedy. And maybe she didn't go for it. I'm not sure. The second one was Watts pitched Favreau when they were shooting the last Spider-Man flick. The one where they brought in all the Spider-Mans with Toby and the other guy, and they were all there. It was the big Spider-Man finale to that trilogy, the home trilogy. Favreau was in that film as the character Lucky, or what's his name, Lucky, or
Happy.
Happy.
He's happy. Yeah, I'd be happy too if I was hanging out with Marissa Tomei like he was in that movie.
Yeah, and probably making a fat paycheck for 2 or 3 days on the set.
Right.
So Favreau, he's becoming more and more of this really pivotal character in both Marvel and Star Wars. And obviously he brought John Watts into the fold. Maybe the idea got a second life and was converted from a film idea into this mini series that we're seeing here. But we know that Favreau was directing the Mandalorian and Grogu film over the summer, which apparently has wrapped. At least principal photography has wrapped. I'm sure there's plenty of other shots that need to be done as pickups, as the editing starts to really shape the film and the story. Though they might find some empty spots, that's to be expected. But for the most part, the principal photography has wrapped. And Filoni is a producer on that film as well. You know, it's the Favreau-Filoni 1-2 punch, the dynamic duo of Star Wars.
The Favloni-verse.
And yeah, the Favloni. I like that. So the Extra TV asked Filoni at the Skeleton Crew premiere event if he can give any updates on the Mandalorian and Grogu film.
Nothing, of course. But, I'm very excited about it as well. John and I had a great time working on that, as we always do. It was great seeing Grogu. He's become such a star. And it's amazing how it's evolved, what we can do now with the puppetry compared to season 1 and where we are today in a film, working with the team, which I worked quite a bit with them on the puppetry, legacy effects. It's just a fantastic job, and what a wonderful little creation Grogu is.
Oh, boy. No one is as skilled. This guy needs to run for office because Filoni can answer. He can give a non-answer answer better than anybody, and we've been talking to him since the very earliest days of the Clone Wars. He's good at that. And he'll also be honest. Like, they ask him the question, he's like, yeah, of course. No, I'm not going to. I can't say anything about that.
Right. And then he deflects and starts talking about how amazing Grogu is,
Yeah.
But he did say that they've made some significant advancements in the puppetry and things like that. So we might be seeing a more animated Grogu, which is something to look forward to.
I hope they don't do full CG, go like they did with Yoda.
Well, he said puppetry. He did say puppetry.
He did say puppetry.
Yeah. And we will take Filoni for his word. He's not one of those guys who will flat out lie.
No.
Like his superior, Kathy Kennedy, who has no problem with bold-faced lies. She has no problem with that. Filoni's a little more cagey and a little more in touch with fandom. And, he has more of a clue. So we know that Dave, in addition to working on the Mandalorian and Grogu film, he has another big thing coming up next year, and that's Ahsoka Season 2. So Filoni explains where things are at with Season 2 for Ahsoka.
I'm so well into that as well. It's, almost, I've been writing it, and I'm still the single writer on it. And so I've been enjoying doing that, but it's a challenge, of course, and working some of these arcs through has been a challenge, and making sure it's all going to, come out in a way that I think is exciting for fans. I know that they're interested in where some of the things I developed in season 1 go. So, I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, we'll see. It's going to be I love working with that team. I love working with Rosario, so I can't wait to get back to that.
I was a massive Rebels fan. And
thank you so much. Yeah. Well, it's coming up. It's my next thing, I think, of my many things.
Interested? Yeah, Dave. We're pretty damned curious about all the massive holes in the storytelling of season 1. Has
there ever been anything? Has there ever been anything? Any single story told in Star Wars that has more loose ends than that Ahsoka. Maybe the solo film a little bit. But that Ahsoka season 1 left us hanging on just about every significant detail having to do with the story.
Every character had some mystery wrapped around him, all the way to, Jason Sindoa. And he only had a little bit of screen time. I mean, every character, there was something left unresolved. And Jim, you were mentioning earlier, we were talking about Hondo Ohnaka and how, maybe that's a Filoni character that he has, full say over. When he says here that he's the solo writer on this, I got to tell you, I scratch my head because I don't know, is that because Dave insists that way, or is that because, this is sort of Dave's passion project at Lucasfilm, and they're just going to let Dave kind of wrap this up. Maybe it's both. But I got a lot of respect for Dave Filoni. Lots of respect for Dave Filoni. But I think season 1 proved that he needs some collaborators.
Yeah, when it comes to live action, I mean, this is not animation. This is live action, and it's a bold story. It's a big, bold story. Dave has great ideas, but it all comes down to the execution. And I hope when Dave is done crafting these scripts, he brings in some people to take second passes at them, or just to maybe make a suggestion or two, a little script doctoring, if you will. Because I don't know. I mean, some of the scripts from season 1 needed a lot more than doctoring. Those are for open heart surgeries, So it was, it was
a little
rough
more
stuff.
than just a patch up. Yeah.
This is not animation. So enough with the cartoonish storytelling. Let's present a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and is fully fleshed out. And you're right, every character being shrouded in mystery, but every character acting as if they know what the mysteries are. And the audience left totally in the blank. We had no avatar for the audience.
You don't want to feel stupid as an audience member. You don't want to know everything, but you want to know most things, or at least, as you keep pointing out, learning along with your protagonists, with your main characters, so that you're on the adventure with them. Otherwise, it's like everybody's talking in code or something. It just feels...
It's all just because. And I'm tired of just because storytelling. I want something that has some meat on the bone. So, and I think Filoni can deliver. I think he has great ideas. I really do. I think he's very creative, and I think he's very smart, and I think he's a sharp guy who sat at the feet of George Lucas. But like George Lucas, he desperately requires help in the writer's room.
Yes, and when you were saying about, this isn't a cartoon, I think that some listeners might out there be saying, well, there's quality storytelling, and it's not about the quality so much. I think the big difference is that when it came to Clone Wars 1, Dave was surrounded by other writers, including George Lucas. So similarly with Rebels, but he had 20, in the case of Clone Wars, 20 some episodes. So he had a long time to be able to swing back and grab things and do all of these different arcs. But man, with these Disney Plus series, outside of Mandalorian, and now Ahsoka, and it sounds like Ahsoka is going to be 2 seasons and out. You don't get that kind of time. You don't get the time to tell these stories.
Oh my God. You get 8 episodes, half hour to 45 minutes long, and then a 3-year intermission. That's a lot for an audience to endure, and it's a lot to ask of an audience. It's really taking your audience for granted, if you ask me. Let's tighten it up a little bit. Come on, we deserve that. We've been with Star Wars for almost 5 decades.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's a thought around Lucasfilm will say, well, look, George made people wait 3 years between films. JJ made people wait 2 years between films. But those were big event films. Television we consume much differently. The immediacy, you go and you turn the set on, or you turn the screen on. It's a very, very different type of consumption than the big event where you go out and see the film.
Nobody is camping out for a month on the sidewalk for a Disney Plus series. Just to kind of back up what you're saying.
Yeah.
No one's camping out.
Yeah, high ground. That's mic drop high ground. So
high ground
right there. Absolutely. All right, so more people were at this premiere,
Yes.
including Doug Chang. And Doug, of course,
Chang
goes back a long time with visual design in Star Wars.
Lucasfilm veteran Doug Chang. He's an executive now, just like Filoni, another guy who sat at the feet of George Lucas and learned how to create Star Wars. But, Doug comes at it from more the visual thing than the storytelling thing. And he did serve as a production designer, probably chief production designer for Skeleton Crew. And so he's still getting his hands dirty in Star Wars, despite the fact he's sitting up in the executive suite now as a vice president of the company. But Doug was at the Skeleton Crew Disneyland premiere, and he talked about what makes the show appeal to him as a Star Wars fan and a fan of cinema.
I think the whole series is so rich, both visually and emotionally, because what I enjoy about Skeleton Crew is that it hits all those touchstone points about what makes Star Wars Star Wars, and it's that fun adventure. From a design point of view, the world is really rich because you're going on this journey and you're discovering new planets, new characters, new locations with the kids. In so many ways, you're experiencing the wonderment of Star Wars through their eyes. I think that's one of the wonderful things about where we are in Star Wars right now is that we're inviting new filmmakers, new points of views into the Star Wars universe. And I love that because the energy that we sort of can combine and sort of grow, it takes that and elevates Star Wars into a whole new level. And so working with Watson Ford was really terrific because I'm a huge fan of their work. And to see their perspective of how they envision their Star Wars was really wonderful because it actually pushes the envelope of design and aesthetics a little further. And that's what Star Wars needs. It needs that freshness. It needs that fun, that new adventure.
Okay. Doug, the question, the follow-up question I would have for him would be, you got Ford and Watson Ford, but this isn't new. We've had a cavalcade of different creatives since 2012 in the acquisition of Lucasfilm by Disney. I think what maybe, I can't obviously speak for Doug, but what was ringing in my head when I heard him say that was we now have some actual qualified filmmakers to take on this role and helm this series. Now, I'm sure he has respect for all of his colleagues that he's worked with, but this does seem to be, Jim. There seems to be an amount of trust, a level of trust with Watson Ford. When you hear Filoni talk about it, you hear Doug Chang talk about it, that maybe either wasn't there, but then there's a cynical part of me that goes, well, maybe the company just didn't care as much about this show as they did some of the other ones where it seemed like they were really, I don't know, maybe letting the creatives run a little bit more amok. So Watson Ford aren't necessarily the concept of these outside filmmakers coming in and doing Star Wars. That it's not new.
Of course, it's not new. We had J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson helm the films of the sequel trilogy. We had Gareth Edwards helm Rogue One, and we had Ron Howard along with the Meatballs guys.
The Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs guys?
Yeah. And
the Lego movie guys.
So, I mean, let's just look at the track records here.
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams, obviously a proven talent, and The Force Awakens was pretty well received. Rian Johnson, maybe not so proven in the realms of big major motion picture tentpole events. And The Last Jedi, not so well received. Gareth Edwards in Rogue One, I mean, that's just kind of a miracle. And we should.
Boy,
who came in to save the day?
Yeah.
Well, the guy who
Tony
wrote
Gilroy.
Michael Clayton. I mean, yeah, the Bourne Identity guy.
Right.
The Bourne. What do they call them? The Bourne Adventures or whatever they call them.
Yeah, well, the Bourne films. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have Gilroy. Andor, big success as well as far as like critical appeal. I mean, there are fans who can say, well, it didn't connect with Star Wars enough, and there was a lot of talking and sitting around the fire. And, we were just talking about this during the after show. But there is a richness and a quality to Andor that you can't deny. The acting is superb. The camera work is great. And the dominoes all fall in a direction as far as the storytelling goes that makes a lot of sense and works well as a setup to Rogue One. And I'm really looking forward to season 2. Now you have with the streaming shows, Mandalorian, huge success. Jon Favreau, big-time Hollywood filmmaker, an actor himself, a guy who knows what to do in front of the camera and what to do behind the camera and what to do in the editing suite. I mean, everything. Favreau is a true talent. And he's accompanied by Dave Filoni, a guy who knows his Star Wars. So that's a match made in heaven. But Favreau and Filoni get really busy, so they hand a lot of heavy lifting for season 3 of The Mandalorian over to Rick Famuyiwa, who isn't quite as proven.
Right.
Doesn't have the pedigree and is still learning on the job. And I like some of the things Rick has done. But overall, Mandalorian season 3 does not match the quality of 1 and 2. It just doesn't.
No.
And what's the big difference? Rick Famuyiwa, Kenobi, Deborah Chow, again, still learning on the job. Kenobi, a lot of people crapped all over that show. And in Book of Boba Fett, it's Robert Rodriguez. He knows what he's doing, of course. But maybe his style doesn't necessarily mesh with Star Wars as far as some fans are concerned.
I think he definitely gave us Robert Rodriguez does Star Wars, and I don't know that was necessarily anything anybody really wanted to see certainly after they saw it. It had some great moments. I mean, I think with Boba and Rodriguez, he's enough of a fan to really give us some unforgettable eye candy on the screen. But for the most part, the story was really, really, really lacking. The show, I remember just talking about how uneven it felt. Very uneven.
It was rather half-baked.
Yeah.
It provided us with a lot of great Star Wars stuff, like Boba emerging from the Sarlacc and that raid on the train with the Tuskens. And I have enjoyed a lot of the Tusken Raiders stuff, learning more about their culture and their society and things like that. They flew the Slave One into the mouth of the Sarlacc. I mean, come on. It looks great on paper, right?
Revenge on the Sarlacc? I mean, that's stuff we've been dreaming about for decades.
And, the extra time spent in Jabba's palace was kind of fun. But then there was, obvious missteps with the Boba Fett show. Skinny Gamorreans. Visual things that didn't work very well either. But it did have those 2 Mandalorian episodes in there.
Yeah,
that
sure did.
at least that one in particular that brought us back with Luke Skywalker. That's pretty big stuff. But that's stuff that appeals to us as fans. I'm just talking about the overall acceptance of these streaming shows based on the talent that makes them. And Boba Fett just didn't really, it kind of landed with sort of a mediocre thud with a lot of the fan base. And we hear you, we see what you're saying, we agree and disagree, but we know what's going on. Then that leads us to Ahsoka. Again, Dave Filoni. Nobody's going to deny his Star Wars pedigree, but he's still learning on the job as far as live action goes. So I put him almost in the same category as a Rick Famuyiwa or as a Deborah Chow. Learning on the job. And so Ahsoka kind of had very, very mixed reviews. It wasn't as good as it should have been, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And that's because Filoni's still learning on the job when it comes to live action filmmaking and storytelling beyond animation. And then we land on Skeleton Crew.
Oh, you skipped Acolyte.
Well, that speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Acolyte, I felt like it was made at times. It was made by high schoolers. It was shot very poorly at times. The sets a lot of times were they were non-convincing, and the acting was sus from a lot of them. It was sus, and it lacked star power too. So the inexperience behind the camera was very obvious in that show. With a price tag, now they're saying that price tag is getting up to $300 million as more information gets revealed.
Yeah.
$300 million for an 8-episode miniseries.
I feel like that's reaching the point, Jim, of scandal. Really. I feel like that the story behind that budget and that production of that series, that season that ended up being a series is almost scandalous. Almost scandalous. Mm-hmm. If I were a shareholder at Disney, especially one of any consequence, I would certainly be very curious about that.
The sets just did not come across on screen.
Where'd the money go?
In the way that I've seen Star Wars sets being presented. Yeah. Kyle Newman's fond of saying that the Jedi Temple interiors look like they were shot at Foot Locker.
Kyle has such a way with words.
Weird.
But it's true. I know, there's an expression that we have when we go see in theater, when we go see a new Broadway show. You walk into the theater, and as soon as that show starts, you look for where the money was spent. Sometimes it's in front of the proscenium by creating that enveloping world before the show even starts, or it could be the star power, or it could be incredible costumes or sets. When I watch The Acolyte, I'm looking around for where all the money was spent, because I don't see it in the obvious places.
Yeah, I can't explain that show. That show is that's a swamp. If Star Wars had a swamp that wasn't Dagobah, it's The Acolyte. And then that leads us to Skeleton Crew, brought to us by Watson Ford, who have had mad success in Marvel with the Spider-Man trilogy, and they deliver. They come through with a really solid, well-thought-out adventure show based around kids. At least 2 episodes in, it seems like it's really well thought out, but I mean, it just looks good. It looks good on screen. The Acolyte did not look good on screen. It just didn't. And I saw the premieres of both on the same movie theater screen in Chicago. And one of them felt like I was watching a TV show in a movie theater. The other one felt cinematic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're in a unique position, you and others that have seen as many of these Disney Plus shows, their premieres, whatever, thrown up on the big screen, because I think that really does kind of tell the tale, something you don't always get. I mean, people consume media now. I think for the most part, people probably have a fine entertainment system in their living room, but you never know. You're on the go. Some people could be on the subway, on the train, catching the episode. Yeah. So they're catching it in a lot of different ways. But boy, that is sort of the great leveler when you see it on that big screen, and that puts you in a unique position to sort of judge the value.
It becomes more of an experience when you're in a theater watching and you're in the dark and you're surrounded by others, as opposed to watching on your iPhone while you're sitting on the train coming home from work. There's a big difference, and it does impact you as far as your fandom goes.
Yeah.
So that's our breakdown of what's going on with Star Wars streaming. Let's go back. Unless, Jason, you have something else you want to say?
No. I didn't want it to sound like I was just taking a crap on, I love Doug Chang. I wasn't taking a crap on what he was saying. Overall, I thought, his points about the point of view being from the kids and them being sort of a vehicle for us to sort of discover Star Wars or rediscover Star Wars was dead on. So it sounds like what we've been speculating and talking about these last several weeks is something that Doug has also is acknowledging here.
And let's point out the fact that he does say Star Wars really needs something fresh. I mean, this guy is like VP of content. He's VP of content, and he's been in that position for a while. And he's been with Lucasfilm forever. And they're still just trying to throw anything up against the wall to see what sticks. Internally at Lucasfilm, they're probably like, God, we got to get away from the Skywalkers and all, because they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
They just simply have been waving this white flag ever since the summer after The Last Jedi was released. And it's getting tiresome. And it's destroying fan confidence. But here at Rebel Force Radio, we're sticking with it. We're going down with the Titanic if we have to. Thankfully, Skeleton Crew has had a very successful launch. The tomatoes are strong. The online buzz is strong. Jude Law, as an emerging character in the show, is only going to draw more eyes as he starts to see more screen time. I guarantee that. Yeah. He's just one of those guys in Hollywood who really is somebody people want to watch.
I'll get you home.
Deal. Rebel Force Radio.
Another guy who we should not diminish his contributions to Skeleton Crew at all is our very own Space Urkel, Jalil White. And it's such a gas to have the guy who brought Urkel to life in Star Wars. I don't know. Maybe some people are annoyed with it. I don't see Urkel necessarily when I see him on screen.
No. I see more Stefan than I do Steve. More Stefan.
More Stefan. I mean, maybe that's an Urkel inside joke.
It is an Urkel inside joke for
Family Matters or something.
So for my Family Matters. Yeah, so for my fellow TGIFers back in the 90s, that was just for you. Jimmy Mack was already out working on his career and dating girls and doing all that stuff by the time Family Matters was on.
I was definitely working on my career. But here's Jalil. He was at the premiere event at Disneyland earlier this week, and he thinks it's like really good timing for a show like Star Wars Skeleton Crew to debut.
I think one of the things that makes Skeleton Crew unique is that you've got kids at the center of the story, but it's not a kid's story. So I want to get back to that, man. Like, I remember that being in the 80s and 90s, you know, a lot of films like Lost Boys and Goonies and whatnot. So that, I think this generation is really going to enjoy, and it's perfect timing for the holidays. Everybody's going to be naturally gathered around checking it out.
You know, I'm glad to hear him say this, Jim, because I recently kind of discovered something sort of by accident where it was Thanksgiving. And I showed my son, well, actually, it wasn't even really intentional. I just put on Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, a great John Hughes classic comedy. And my son, who's never really shown great interest in movies, especially in recent years, sports is his great love. He started watching it and was really, really into it. And we enjoyed it together. And of course, then I was like, okay, well, now we got to see Home Alone. We got to see... And so we've been watching some of these John Hughes movies, and I think what Jalil's talking about is there has been something lost, at least in terms of cinema. I think there's probably some plenty of teen or tween content on television, but nobody's really talking to that audience like we took for granted. I took for granted growing up in the 80s and 90s, where there was so much content, whether it be Star Wars genre entertainment or a guy like John Hughes that was writing specifically for teenagers. You just don't see that very much anymore. And that stuff still resonates. You show a kid in 2024 a John Hughes story and they connect to it because of, the skill set in the writing and the fact that it was a specific audience they were trying to reach, but that has been lacking. So maybe this is going to herald in, a new generation of people that really do want to speak to kids.
Well, look at where George Lucas, from his perspective in the early 70s, and he sees this vacuum in entertainment. There's nothing quality for families. Everything is dumbed down garbage when it comes to kids programming. Everything, the G-rated stuff. You never see G-rated films anymore being released.
Right.
At least, everything is PG now because G is almost like the kiss of death. And that's because of all the crappy G-rated films that were released in the mid to late 70s going into the mid 80s. It was, a lot of it, but it started to diminish once George recognized there was a vacuum and there was no quality entertainment and everything was being dumbed down for kids and families. And he said he needed to recreate the modern myth. He needed to, or create the modern myth and bring Star Wars to the masses, present families and kids with real inspirational storytelling and not stuff that talked down to them.
That's the big part is the talking down. And in the case of Skeleton Crew, they're kids, and character like Neil is worried about what his parents might think, but they're independent. They're off having this adventure. Now they're going to need help, as kids do. But I remember feeling so inspired by those stories. It made the idea of when you did. If you were watching movies like Stand By Me or Goonies or whatever, where you go off on these adventures with your friends, it made the idea of growing up and moving out of the house a little less scary, because you're seeing, I think, how you're taking sort of these steps into this larger world, as Ben Kenobi would later say. I think it's really, really important. I think it's something that's been missing. So even if we have to start by sort of aping the past, like I think that they're doing a little bit here, that's a great start, and definitely the talking down. You can't keep these kids in bubble wrap, and I feel that particularly my generation of parents have tried to do that with their kids, and I don't take that tact. I expose my kids to the kind of stuff that I grew up with. Because, I think I turned out pretty well, but some of the stuff is just so bland. And yeah.
You bring up aping the past. I mean, isn't that what George Lucas was doing with Star Wars? He wanted to bring the serial films back. He wanted to see Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon again. Nobody was making those type of films anymore. George said, you know what, there's a big void.
Yeah, right.
And so, he brought into this new way of storytelling that took the audience serious and actually did a lot to prepare kids of that era for life as an adult. I don't think filmmaking delivers on that level anymore. Now, I know this new Moana film is getting a lot of buzz, but again, we're talking animation.
Right.
We want to see stuff in live action that really matters and makes a difference and could make a difference as far as the youth of today is developing. It could set them on certain paths like the original Star Wars did. How many filmmaking careers rose out of Star Wars fandom? How many authors got inspiration as youth from Star Wars? I mean, I know professionally Star Wars has had a profound impact on me, so I want to maintain that tradition. And maybe Skeleton Crew is the vehicle that will deliver that to today's youth.
I hope that it's at least the symbolic of, a change, a turn of the tide a little bit with some of this stuff. And, we don't necessarily, 'cause some people will say, well, you don't want Star Wars to be kiddified. You don't want it to be all about the kids. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be that. George Lucas and many other icons of entertainment proved that you could have something that worked on both levels. There was something that the kids were responding to and something that the adults in the room were also responding to. There's many, many examples of that, from Disney to Looney Tunes to, of course, movies like Star Wars.
Right on. And speaking of the kids in the room, let's hear from one of the kids from the show, the boy who played Wim, Robbi Kabit Conyers is his name, and he was at the premiere. From what I understand, the kids didn't see any of the episodes until this past Monday at Disneyland. They saw what they saw as far as previs and when they were doing ADR sessions, recording dialogue for the show, they got to see certain things. But for the most, they didn't see complete episodes until this past week. At the Disney premiere, 3 episodes were screened. So there are people out there who've seen episode 3. Damn them. But for the boy who played Wim, Robbi Kabit Conyers, he says that that day was a long time in the making.
It's so exciting. This series has been such a long time coming. We did this almost 2 years ago. We wrapped like a year and a half-ish ago. So we're so excited. And it's fitting that we're here at Disneyland because the series is led through the eyes of children, which is a very new perspective. So very fun.
Hey, this kid's a pro. You see the way he handled these reporters? Man, he knew
he's great. Yeah.
He knew his lines. He knew his lines.
He's very slick. He's already a showbiz vet. And that's Robbi. So, like you said, they shot this thing 2 years ago.
Yeah, my God, it started in June 2022. That's when they started filming this thing.
And then they ran into strikes and all of that stuff, which made everything delayed. But he's still just as charming as he was 2 years ago.
And when the kids are this age, Jim, I mean, you recall what happened with Stranger Things and in the Harry Potter films. When they're this precious age, if you plan to follow up, you got to do it fairly quickly, or you got to do a time jump. And if this is successful and the fans want to see more of Skeleton Crew, already noticing they look a little bit different.
A little bit, yes. But I watched all of them in press conference situations, and they all just seem to be like really charming, cute kids. And even 2 years later. So there is potential for a second season of this show. Obviously, none has been announced. I'm sort of treating it as a mini series at this point.
Yeah.
A one and done adventure. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. We'll see how many loose threads there are following episode 8. They may have left the door open.
Yeah, I was going to say, if these characters were to take off in some way, wouldn't that really be a gift to Lucasfilm in the sense that, here they are, they're dealing with a lot of aging actors and aging characters. That would really be something if all of a sudden, hey, here's 4 characters that Star Wars fans really, really love. They want to see more of them. And hey, the good news is they're all, young teenagers. Yeah. So you've got plenty of opportunity and time to get them out there.
Team them up with Baby Grogu, and the next thing you know, you got a franchise you can ride for decades. It's not like Daisy Ridley's an old lady either. So
no, that's true. So
you could bring them all together. Make it the ultimate Star Wars spin-off. Take obviously the value of all of these characters will never match Han, Luke, Leia.
Mm-hmm.
But you can always team them up with existing characters and bank on the collective value of all these new characters.
Yeah, right.
Then you add in a Chewbacca, 3PO, R2.
Right.
With Rey and the Skeleton Crew kids and Din Djarin and Baby Yoda and everyone, Sabine, Ezra. You have them all there.
Yep. You know what you got? Got yourself a saga.
Yeah, hey, that's a saga. You put BB-8 in there. They could try with that one again.
Sure.
But let's, BB-8, BB-8 never made it to R2-D2 status, did he?
No, he really didn't. I thought that he might have a shot at it coming out of Force Awakens, but no, it just didn't. The other part of it too was with the hype that was leading up to BB-8. I was really looking forward to him being sort of a third wheel, no pun intended, to R2 and 3PO. I thought that's really where it was going to go. And R2 spends the whole movie under a tarp, so
True.
I think that BB-8 being part of that duo and turned trio would have probably gone a long way, I think, for a lot of fans in establishing BB-8 a little bit more by putting him in with them. And I never quite knew who BB's. What was it? It was Finn's droid, but wasn't it also kind of, Ray? The action figure of Ray is the one that they always packed the BB-8 with, So
right.
Who was BB-8's owner? I guess it was technically Poe.
Yes, Poe. Definitely Poe.
Yeah.
For sure, Poe. As a matter of fact, in that Star Wars Resistance animated show, in the first season of that, they would, like BB-8 would appear on this this barge that these characters were living on, is sort of a proxy for Poe.
Right.
BB-8 would come and show him a hologram from Poe and stuff.
I forgot that Poe sort of went in and out of that a little bit. He kind of set it up, I think, at the beginning. I don't know. There's part of me that really is bugged by the fact that I haven't watched all of Resistance. I watched like the first 2 episodes and I pieced out. I can't let that happen. I feel like I just got to go and just bite the bullet and watch it.
Yeah, maybe over the holidays you'll be sitting there going, I got a Star Wars itch I need to scratch. You put on Resistance.
Right.
You're like, oh, what am I doing, man? Then you hear Steven Stanton voicing a character that sucks you in. You just
Steven always sucks me in. No, I was glad to see this on the rundown because my Apple TV kept saying, you might like Jude Law on the Jimmy Kimmel show. And I haven't had a chance to watch it, but leave it to Mac, of course, to have it on the rundown and the video highlights here.
Right. So Jude, obviously on a promotional tour for Skeleton Crew, and he, busy Hollywood guy. He's got some other film out there too. But I didn't stick around for conversation of that. I was only interested in the Star Wars stuff. They talked briefly about the McRib.
Are you excited that the McRib is back?
I heard this rumor. I'm delighted.
Jude's really not on board with that. But he is on board with Star Wars, and he explained to Jimmy some of the rules that come into play when you're telling a Star Wars story, the do's and don'ts.
For example, with the costumes, no buttons. You never see any buttons.
Is that
in
true?
Star Wars. Everything is either tied or Velcroed and or buckled, but no buttons and no paper.
Noticed that. Why no buttons?
It's just a rule.
And no paper.
No, if you think about it, you've never seen paper.
Hold on a minute. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, is there toilet paper in Star Wars world? Or is Luke using like his robe, or like the belt around? Like,
I think they have Japanese toilets.
They have Japanese toilets. It is funny because everything's still made of metal and it's kind of a little bit rusty.
But everything's always on a monitor, right? Or a hologram.
Boy, where's Paul Bateman? Where is Paul to hear this? So according to Jude is sharing the gospel of now Paul would point out zippers a lot of times. Were buttons on Paul's list of no-nos? Buttons and zippers, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Bootins, as Paul would call them. Bootins.
Though, but I think that this is like a topic of conversation that's coming up a little more often. And I almost have to think that we have Paul Bateman to thank for that, because he certainly got on a soapbox and was yelling loudly
very much
about things like that when violations occurred in the past. And, Paul took some heat for that too. People thought he was being over the top. He was being too picky. He was tearing it apart too much. He was being too precious.
Yeah.
He was being insane. He was being a crazy man, crazy person, crazy Paul Bateman. No, he really had a point. And he had the proof to back it up too, via quotes from guys who had worked on the original Star Wars films and were relaying information that George Lucas gave them. And so Paul should definitely feel vindicated that,
Absolutely.
That those rules have made it to Jude Law. You know, I mean, this is mainstream Hollywood stuff now. This isn't just stuff for the guys who read like all the art books back in the 70s and 80s. This is the real deal. So Jude Law laying down the law.
Now,
for
I hadn't
Star
heard the
Wars.
paper one. Hadn't really thought of it, but you know, whenever I am watching sci-fi, with very few exceptions, and of course Star Wars is more than sci-fi, but you get the idea. There's no paper. There's screens. Everybody's working off of a terminal. That was different in the Battlestar Galactica reboot, where you actually saw paper books. They all had those like weird corners that were like kind of trimmed off, you know, because they had to make it spacey. But yeah, for the most part, you know, you don't see paper in Trek. You don't see paper in Star Wars. But paper of any kind, you know, now I'm really thinking about this. Yeah, no paper at all in Star Wars. Huh.
In the expanded universe, they used some office supply known as a flimsy, and that was their paper. They would call it flimsy. Oh, I get it. Paper's flimsy. Okay, I get it.
Flimsy.
Wow, that's deep. But yeah, that's what they would substitute as a word for paper in the Star Wars universe. They call it flimsy.
So you might read a comic book, also known as a floppy, and read about Star Wars flimsies. So maybe they talked flimsies in the floppies.
The flimsies, the floppy. The only thing floppy about Skeleton Crew are Neil's ears.
I did love this scene when they're all listening in the door, you know, trying to see what's going on, and you know, behind that door that we then find out is a ship. And poor Neil has to like lift the ear flap over. Kind of reminds me of my golden retriever, who have to always flip his big ear flaps up too.
What a good boy.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a meteor clip here, but I think it's really worth listening to closely for clues about what to expect from Jude's character, Jod Na Nawood, as he discusses the character with Jimmy Kimmel in this clip. So let's turn it over to Jude.
My character doesn't really have parental abilities. And you get a sense that he's not had much of a childhood, so he just treats them like adults, and he doesn't understand why they're crying for their mom and they're hungry. I'm like, fly the spaceship, like, you know, take the blaster. We got these bags, you know. So there's a lovely friction in their relationship. He's just like, come on, get on with it.
Your character's name is Jod.
Yeah.
Jodd.
J-O-D.
Oh, J-O-D.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Because I was thinking it was just like Todd, and they just added a little curve to it, and, you know, which is my dog's name, which is kind of like Todd. I mean, J-O-D is more like, oh, yeah, it's kind of a play on God, then, or Zod. Yeah, Jod. Okay, all right. I think that's better.
Wood.
That extra D makes all the difference there. Because, yeah, you got Luke, and you got Lando, and then you got Jod. It's not quite, it doesn't have the punch.
I'll give you a little secret.
Yes.
He goes by many names. So you'll learn as different people know him from different.
I would go by many names too if my name was Jod, for sure. Is Jod a Jedi?
I can't tell you that.
You can't. He is. They said what? He is force sensitive. Was the term?
He's sensitive.
He's sensitive. Which sounds
and he
like
has force.
Force sensitive is like lactose intolerant. It's like, you know, force sensitive means he has the.
It means
power.
that he has the potential to use the force. Potential to use the force.
When you tell me you can't tell me. Does that mean
means I can't.
You know?
Tell you.
Is it possible that you don't know?
No, I know.
Oh, you do know?
Yeah, I did the show.
Okay. All right. Well, sometimes that's for the next season.
Oh, I see. Oh, no.
For you to find out.
Most of what we're discussing will be revealed.
I see.
Over the 8.
All right. So Jude Law here saying that most of the mysteries that they're talking about, Force user versus Jedi, will be revealed over the 8 episodes that we'll see. And And he throws out Jimmy Kimmel throws out it, almost kind of referring to his notes, like it says here Force user. So the prep materials that Kimmel has been given clearly explicitly say Force user. It's Kimmel that's asking the extra layer, are you a Jedi? And that's where Jude Law says, I can't tell you. And I was really glad, though, that Kimmel followed up with, is it you can't tell me because you don't know or because you can't say? And he's like, well, of course I know. I did the show. So he wasn't, he's telling us that these are things that will be revealed most likely by the end of the 8-episode run. The other thing that I picked up on as he was talking about, the character was he's not coming right out and saying that he's a Jedi, but boy, he's really all but saying it. So I think it's probably a foregone conclusion that this guy, he's got to have more than just the natural inclination or the natural raw ability. This feels like there's been some level of training in here at some point. So perhaps another Padawan who made it out of Order 66.
I agree with your assessment of that entire situation there. And also, like you, I'm glad that Kimmel followed up. Are you being coy or you just don't know? And he's like, oh, I'm just holding out. You'll find out. Kimmel did say he watched the first 2 episodes before he conducted the interview. And also it was interesting to hear Kimmel talking like we do about how this could be a show that you could watch with your own kids. And
yeah,
Jimmy says his kids have not been bitten by the Star Wars bug despite his efforts. So he's hoping this might be a good on-ramp into Star Wars for his own family. And that's something that we've been talking about. I think some of our listeners are also thinking about that as well.
There's another clue, though, that Jude drops at the beginning of the clip where he's talking about his character not really having those parental skills. Now, there's a lot of reasons why a character might not or a person might not have parental skills. One of them could be you were raised in a Jedi temple and you did not have parents of your own, per se, that you might remember, you might recall, to set that example. So, he's saying, I'm like, fly the ship, do this, do that, and they're crying for their mom, and I can't understand this. Well, that would line up with somebody who would have been raised amongst the Jedi.
Right. He has a different background that is not part of your traditional nuclear family. It's a whole different situation for Jod. And I also like how he says he's known by several names. We've already heard him being referred to as Captain Silva. And or Silvo, is it Silva?
Yeah, I believe Silva.
That's what. And there could be some other names he's known by too, other than Jod. So I like hearing him drop all that knowledge on us. And I believe we covered all the things he spoke about.
Sure does seem like he's enjoying it. He doesn't seem reluctant to talk about it by any means. Now, I know he's out there to promote it, but you can tell when somebody's, really enthusiastic about it and when they're a little less so. And I think that Jude seems like he's really enjoying himself talking about this project, and he had a lot of fun. I do get the sense, though, Jim, you said in your mind you're kind of treating this as, or thinking about this as a mini series, maybe like a one and done. And it's kind of what I'm picking up from Jude. Nothing that he says, just sort of the general vibe, because you hear Kimmel at one point say, "Oh, maybe this is something that's going to be revealed in another season," and Jude does not pick up that track at all. That he does not jump on that and say, "Oh, well, we'd love to do another season," or "Wouldn't that be wonderful?" He just goes, "No, you'll know this stuff, most of this stuff by the end of the 8." So
yeah, well, that's good. That indicates we're getting a fairly self-contained story, and I think we deserve that at this point. as far as being Star Wars fans. So Jude Law definitely bringing some real star power to this show as well. And I think that's only going to benefit the show as his character starts to emerge and take more of the center stage in Star Wars Skeleton Crew.
Chewie, get us out of here!
All right, and that does wrap things up for us here this week on the Rebel Force Radio Weekly Podcast. Much, much more RFR coming your way here as we've only just begun our way through Star Wars Skeleton Crew. We've got a brand new episode of the series and of our after shows next week. And, of course, more of the weekly podcast as well. We'll be back on YouTube. Streaming live on Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Central. You do the math on the rest with those live after shows. And what makes them so much fun is the live callers. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to it live, and not just the calls, but also the chat, if you're a Patreon member or if you've been thinking about joining Patreon, I think the after shows are one of the best tastes of what the Patreon experience is, because so many of the regulars in the chat and on the calls are Patreon members. So if you're thinking, my gosh, these people that call up the RFR after shows, they sound like they'd be a good hang, and these are my type of Star Wars fans. You can find all that and more at Rebel Force Radio on Patreon. So head over to rebelforceradio.com. Click on the Patreon banner on the right rail, and you'll be treated to all of your options of how you can support and join and get more Rebel Force Radio content. Or just go to patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Weekly full show videos of the podcast you're listening to right now. You could also be watching. It's amazing how that's sort of grown and that's sort of becoming a thing. Some people, that's now their preferred method of consuming RFR, is that weekly video. But as we know, podcasts are a lot more than just video. It's entertainment and content on the go, whether you're doing your commute or if you're still in the warmer climates, maybe you're mowing your lawn or you're shoveling snow if you're in the Midwest. And you can do that and get a lot more Rebel Force Radio podcasts exclusively through RFR on Patreon, including the Q&A, the Bobby Freaks. That's all there for you. Also, you're just going to be, I think, met and greeted by a lot of really great Star Wars fans. And I think they're the absolute best Star Wars fans on the internet. That's all there. Rebel Force Radio on Patreon. Please check us out on YouTube. That is the exclusive home of our after shows. So check out RFR on YouTube and like and subscribe today. All of the after shows. Boy, I was working on the website earlier this week and just looking at all the after shows that we've done. We've got these incredible time capsules for every single episode of every Disney Plus show. So if you're wondering, what were people thinking when that third episode of The Book of Boba Fett aired? You just go right to rebelforceradio.com or our YouTube channel, and you can hear it. You can hear it. This is what we thought in that moment. So whether it be Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett or Acolyte or any of the series going all the way back to the Clone Wars, we've got that experience waiting for you. So check it out, Rebel Force Radio on YouTube. Also on our social media channels, X, Instagram, and Facebook. The official website for all things and everything, Rebel Force Radio, rebelforceradio.com. But if you want to help us out, the best thing you can do for us, and it costs you nothing, is just to do exactly what you're doing right now. Keep listening. Keep up the engagement. Drop us an email. Drop us a voicemail. And spread the word amongst your friends and your family, people that love Star Wars. The holidays are coming up. We've got new Star Wars on Disney+. There's going to be conversation. Please let them know about Rebel Force Radio, our after shows, the weekly podcast, all of it. The Patreon. You spreading the word really, really helps us. So keep listening. Leave us a review if your podcatcher of choice allows such things. We have one simple rule, please.
Make them good.
All right, that'll do it for us. We'll see you next week for more Rebel Force Radio, including the after show and the weekly podcast. So until then, for RFR, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Man.
And remember,
The Force will be with you, always.
Jod.
Found the computer outlet, sir.
Get full access to RFR only on Patreon. Become a member of the RFR Patreon community to get more Rebel Force Radio. Bonus shows and content are available right now only at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Exclusive programming like RFR Q&A featuring you as the show host. Become a member of the RFR Patreon community to get it all. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Don't wait. Visit Patreon today to get all access to RFR. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.